Yay, good morning, people of God, or good afternoon or good evening, depending on exactly when you're jumping on board with us today. We're delighted to be with you. Our Vicar John is currently in a pastor training class, so he is not able to join us today. And we are looking at the text for Sunday, March 7th, 2021. That is the third Sunday in Lent in year B.
So crazy.
It is absolutely crazy. This is the year of the covenant. So we roll through 5 different covenants or promises that God has made with us. And Pastor Tanner is going to be looking at the Exodus text in just a moment. And I will deviate from the normal Markan text, and we'll be jumping into John for a little bit. And it's great. I really like this passage because it shows, as Vicar John said last Sunday in his sermon, we get all these different pictures of Jesus, right? But if you only saw this one picture of Jesus, you would probably be alarmed because it doesn't seem like the Jesus that most of us know or understand. So I'll read the preface to Sundays and Seasons here, and I have wordsmithed it just a little bit to incorporate the sermon title, which is talking about a holy dismantling. What does that mean? You'll have to tune in to worship on Sunday to find out more. The third covenant in this year's Lenten readings is a central one of Israel's history, the gift of the law to those God freed from slavery. The commandments begin with the statement that because God alone has freed us from the powers that oppressed us, we are to let nothing else claim first place in our lives. Then, fast forward, when Jesus throws the merchants out of the temple, he is defending the worship of God alone and rejecting the ways commerce and profit-making has become our gods. This text is about a holy dismantling of that which was corrupt, unjust, and appalling. In the Older Testament, the 10 Commandments are essential to our baptismal call, centered first in God's liberating love. We strive to live out justice and mercy in our communities and the world. Bum, 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 ba, bum, ba, We're going to sing In the Cross of Christ at Glory.
It's our closing hymn, right?
Oh, it's our opening.
That's the opening. Oh.
Yeah. No, the closing, I think, let's see. I'll
Lift
scroll
high?
down. Is lift high the cross.
Right.
Like we're gonna dust off the organ for that, people of God. You'll love it. And then if we could sing the Canticle of the Turning with an Irish brogue, that would be grand.
We do have many recordings of the Canticle of the Turning.
I love that song.
Some better than others. We're getting to the point in our church here where we can start listening back to some of the Lenten recordings that we made last year at this time to see how we've gotten better, theoretically, hopefully.
For sure better.
I don't know.
It has to. We've had to gain something along this course.
It's possible that our recordings are better, but our singing is not. That's, I think, where we are sometimes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I was trying to sing the song in the sanctuary, and I like have the breaking point, like you got it, Holden, that just can't quite. There's a ceiling.
Clearly, we've lost a little range this year by not being a part of congregational singing. I'm genuinely interested when we get back to in-person worship, and then we get back to in-person worship that includes congregational singing, what that's going to sound like.
It might sound like a bunch of hens and roosters.
It is going to be a joyful noise. Emphasis on the noise. It's going to be great.
I'm sure it'll be fine. I think we should show off our cups. So I'm drinking out of the Mayo Clinic Strong one today.
And I'm drinking out of Thorvald's cream of lutefisk soup.
Yum.
Good for casseroles. Oh no, hot dishes. Sorry, we're in Minnesota. Great for hot dishes, don't you know?
Hot dishes.
For sure.
Not to be confused with somebody who looks like a hot dish
Boat, a boat, and a boat.
in a boat. And if we could drag our rolls a little bit more today, that'd be great then.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Sure.
out in a boat.
sure. You betcha.
So pick up a cup of coffee, and sit
Yeah.
down and listen to this riveting podcast and Bible study, Well, that almost sounded Canadian. Dwayne Tannehill will be pleased.
We're rough. We're too far north. We went too far north. All right.
Sorry.
The
Yeah, stop at
borders
the
are
border.
closed, Pastor Jules. Come on now.
Stop at the border. Woo!
Okay. All right. So our first reading for today is from Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 17. And as Pastor Jules mentioned, this is the third covenant that we're looking at in this season of Lent this year. And the intro from Sundays in the seasons reads thus. After escaping from slavery, the Israelites come to Mount Sinai, where God teaches them how to live in community. The Ten Commandments proclaim that God alone is worthy of worship. Flowing from God, the life of the community flourishes when based on honesty, trust, fidelity, and respect for life, family, and property. All right. Exodus chapter 20, verse 1. God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. And you shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of their parents to the third and fourth generations of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. Honor your father and your mother, so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or male or female slave, or ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God. I would bet that this is a familiar text to you, that you've learned at some point. I was actually looking back through our recordings. Remember when we did the Augsburg Confession recordings sometime in the last year? I don't actually remember when. I thought maybe we were doing a series on some of the catechism stuff, but maybe we just talked about it and never actually did it.
Boy, I bet somebody will be able to tell us whether we did that or not.
I was trying to look back through some of our YouTube videos, but to be honest with you, there's like 350 or 400 videos on our YouTube channel now, and like a year ago there were none. So there's the year in a nutshell for me, at least.
That's fine. That's like a video a day almost.
It was nuts. I was like, where are all these from? Like, why do we have all these? And I was just trying to remember it anyway. So I don't remember, but if I can find it, I'll link it in the thread. Because I'm sure that at some point in time we at least talked about all these.
I was trying to remember if it was Life of Brian that had 15 commandments and then
okay. 10 commandments. Yeah. Yeah. This is what happens when you try to hold 3 things at the same time. It's not possible.
3 tablets are hard. 2, not as much.
Anyway.
You're welcome.
So I'm sure that this text is familiar to you. I'm sure that you have had your fill of learning about the 10 Commandments in one way or the other. A reminder that these exist both in Exodus and also in Deuteronomy. So what I kind of want to do today is just pull out a couple of random little points throughout it and not dig into all of the actual text, all the actual commandments and how we understand them. So
So you're
Um,
gonna focus on the ox and the donkey?
I'm going to focus solely on the ox and the donkey today. Yes, yes. I was really thinking about the red thread of the ox and donkey throughout the Holy Scriptures. Comes out a lot. So, I mean,
Donkey,
at one point in time, the donkey starts talking. So,
which is great
great story,
and
right?
totally freaks Balaam out.
Really frightening story, but very good story. So, anyway. Okay, so this text is referred to as the Decalogue, which is the 10 precepts, the 10 words, the 10 commandments, right? The first thing that comes up in this text that I think is really important is in the very first verse. God spoke all these words. And the assumption here, and the reality here, is that God is speaking directly to the people, right? So up until this point, God is always talking through Moses, right? And sending Moses with God's words to the people to tell them things. And they've been at Mount Sinai for like a while at this point. Like they have arrived and they've done some stupid things already and done some good things already, mostly stupid things. But every time God speaks to the people, God always speaks through Moses. In this instance, God is speaking directly to the people. So they have all literally gathered at the foot of the mountain. We read this in chapter 19, and God is talking to them. And the first thing that God says is, I am the Lord your God. And that's important, right? Like we often skip over that little bit as the prelude in our commandments, but it is this moment of recognizing that the people have been claimed. They are not alone, and they have never been alone. And I think it's a good reminder as we talk about these covenants, each of these covenants over the 5 weeks of 5 Sundays in Lent that we've been working on, that not each of these covenants does not involve like God starting over with a new group of people. All of these covenants build on one another, right? So God has had a relationship with these people for generations, right? I am the God of your ancestors, of Jacob and Isaac and Abraham. I mean, et cetera, right? We hear that God has claimed these people, but has claimed generations of these people as God's own. And so that I think is a useful thing to get out of these first couple of verses here. And then we get this really cool little breakdown, right? So we learned the 10 commandments in a very certain way, like, right, the numbering of the 10 commandments. But I don't know about you. One of the things that always frustrates me when I see the 10 commandments like printed somewhere is that it's wrong. They're in the wrong order, right? Because Augustine of Hippo, who was a bishop in the early church, renumbered the commandments, right? So he combined the traditional view of commandment 1 and 2, and then he split 10 into 2 different commandments. And that's where we're at. So we share a numbering of the 10 commandments with the Roman Catholic Church, and that's about it. The Orthodox Church, all the rest of the Protestant denominations, the non-denominational folk, all number their commandments slightly differently from us, which means that the first 3 and number 10 are different. And since there are more of them than there are of us in terms of population, and they tend to put out more stuff into the world of random Christian gifts and memorabilia, most of the 10 commandments, like pictures or tchotchkes that you'll find out there, have a different numbering system than we probably learned it, which doesn't really matter. It's all the same, but it's just, I don't know. I want to name it because it frustrates me when I see it. It's wrong.
Do you feel better now?
I do. I feel better about that. Thank you.
Good.
So what we end up with in this first chunk, what we would call the first commandment, you shall not have any other gods before me, right? But more than that in here is with this lovely idea of a jealous God punishing children for the iniquity of their parents. We skip over that bit because that bit is, I don't know, what's the word? Harsh? Angry? Wrathful? But I want to point out that in terms of covenants, like sometimes covenants change, right? So like not change so much as they get superseded, right? And so we have this covenant and this language here, but then when we go to Jeremiah chapter 31, we have completely different language that says, that was part of the covenant, but we don't actually think that that is how God is going to react and interact with us anymore. And then God says, I will make a new covenant. And that new covenant includes language that says things like, when somebody screws up, it's their own fault, and we don't blame generation after generation after generation. So I think that that's just useful to remember, that those things get amended as we go throughout the scriptures. And then we get one of my favorite commandments is to remember the Sabbath day. Maybe that's why I became a pastor. It's always struck me, which is the third commandment in our tradition, right? The seventh day is a Sabbath day for the Lord. I love the history and the tradition of the Sabbath day. I think that it is fascinating. I think that one of the most fascinating things about the Sabbath day is how we have, for generations in multiple traditions, worked to get around it in so many ways. So whether that is, like coming to a point in time in our history where if we had a worship service in our congregation that was more than an hour, like people might rumble a little bit. But 100 years ago, the average length of a sermon was like an hour. And then there was also additional worship within our Lutheran tradition. And that, I think, is, like there are just things that have changed over the years. One of the coolest things that I learned when I was on my internship out in New York was about something called an eruv. You know about that, Pastor Jules? An eruv? Have you heard of that before?
How do you spell it?
E-R-U-V. I think it's probably Hebrew, so I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly. But an eruv, there is something called an eruv in Manhattan. What it is a thin wire that surrounds a 22-mile section of the island of Manhattan. And what an eruv does in traditional Orthodox Judaism is it sets anything within it as your home, right? So on the Sabbath day, in traditional Orthodox Judaism, you can't do anything, right? You're not allowed to talk to people that aren't in your immediate family. You're not allowed to go outside and carry things. You're not allowed to work and do this stuff. You can only do things within your own home. And so an eruv expands the definition of what your home is. And so an eruv, the eruv in Manhattan surrounds, literally a 22-mile section of the island of Manhattan, and makes everything within that section your home. So that on the Sabbath day, you can continue to work because you are technically inside your home. And there's literally a group of Orthodox rabbis whose job it is to go out at the crack of dawn every Thursday, rain or shine, all year round, and check every inch of the eruv to make sure that it is connected. Because if it's disconnected, like if a piece of wire breaks, then they have to repair it before the Sabbath day. And they spend $100,000 a year maintaining the eruv just on the island of Manhattan. And I think that's fascinating. Just to think about the ways in which we get around this idea of Sabbath. I don't know. I thought it's really cool. There's actually a Twitter account for the island of Manhattan's eruv to let you know whether or not it is up before the Sabbath. And they post every week, letting you know if it's up. I think that's interesting.
That's really interesting. I've never heard of that before.
There you go. You can look it up. I will link in a video talking about the eruv from Business Insider about the nice Orthodox rabbi who is in charge of the eruv. It is fascinating.
I will read it.
Okay. All right. So that's the third commandment, or the fourth commandment, depending on what tradition you come from.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Sabbath because I'm also talking about in the sermon the importance of prayer and particularly centering prayer.
Always good.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to mention the mystics?
I am.
Really?
It's so weird.
I'm shocked.
Just a little bit, because Cynthia Bourgeois wrote a book called Centering Prayer.
Cynthia Bourgeois. You're kidding me. You're going to mention Cynthia Bourgeois. Wow.
Well, I could mention Barbara Brown Taylor too, because she wrote the third Sunday in Lent and Feasting on the Word, where she talks about, the appearance of the Decalogue in today's readings gives preachers a perfect opportunity to explore the relationship between God's faithfulness and human obedience.
Excellent. You know who you should add to your list? You should add a cool lady named Julie Augustin. If you've never read her before, she wrote Finding Home, and she also wrote 26 Reflections as Benedictions, and a book, one of my favorite books. It's called Holy Ground, an Alphabet of Prayer. That is like a what was the Psalm thing we were talking about called, where each letter represents a thing? Remember we were talking about John last week?
Epitaph?
I think an epitaph is something you put on your tombstone.
That's right.
That's not what we're talking about.
It's not that. No, it's.
But you should start thinking about what you want on your tombstone. Make it good.
Do that. That's important, and it would help your family a lot, as well as writing your own obituary. But that's not what we're talking about.
No, but there's something in the Psalms. It's like each letter of the Hebrew alphabet lines up. Listen to our Bible study from the last 2 weeks. It's in there. I can't remember what it's called. But anyway, her Holy Ground reflections are intended to be alphabetical, like day by day reflection. It's really good. I would consider her a modern day mystic as well.
You know who else just wrote a book on that was Anna Carter Florence, I think.
Oh, really?
I think so. I think she did some, I don't know if it's out yet. She was talking about it when we were at Festival of Homiletics.
There are a lot of people writing good stuff right now.
She read through a portion of it, and I thought, that was great. It was, I mean, she's also really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, she wrote an article that will always stick with me because it's directed at seminary students, and it's called "Put Away Your Sword." Like
the one that was writing about the getting rid of the militarization of language in the Bible.
Nope, that's Elizabeth Lesser.
Can't keep track of mystics these days.
From Cassandra Speaks, but no, this was published probably 15 years ago. But it's so funny because she's a homiletic professor, and she's like, all of her students were like, basically, you got to kill people and then bring them back to life. That idea of a sermon, and she's like, no, put away your sword. It's still really hard to live a day without using a war metaphor.
Yeah. Was that a Luther seminary adage? Kill him and then bring him back? Was that a?
No, that was Gracia Grindal, who said you need to convict people of their sins and then free them from them at the end. And I'm like, aren't they already beaten up by the time we get them?
Where was she a professor?
She is a professor of homiletics and I want to say worship and liturgy at Luther Sem.
At Luther. Okay, yeah. Because like I've heard. So one of the things I think is really fascinating is that each seminary in the ELCA has its own like thing when it comes to preaching that gets associated with them over the years. And that's one of them that I've always associated with Luther because it's just been like kind of passed down a little bit. And each seminary has its own random little thing. Like United Seminary out in Pennsylvania, their big thing is like you always have to send people on a mission. Like every sermon is sending people out into the world to do this specific, like whatever. I mean, they're very missional focused on theirs.
Go therefore.
Go and do these things, and that's just, I don't know, just interesting. So anyway, the only other thing I have to say about this text from Exodus is a point that was brought up from one of the folks I was reading, and that is this idea that God presents each of these commandments as totally equal. But we do not view them as equal, right? We put a lot more concentration on thou shalt not kill than we do on remember the Sabbath day. And what would happen if we put the same amount of emphasis on each one of these commandments?
Right.
So that was something that I've been just noodling around a little bit. So,
Mhm.
all right, we should go into our annoying interlude into John's Gospel.
Yes. And to be clear, when we say you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, that's not talking about a bear.
No, it's not. I mean, you shouldn't throw a bear at your neighbor either.
That's
Maybe
true.
maybe a koala bear. They're adorable, but
And sometimes vicious.
and sometimes vicious. In general, though, for the sake of the bear, also don't throw the bear at somebody.
All right, so we move into John chapter 2, 13 through 22.
Clearly, we need Vicar John here. Like, clearly.
Just to temper the conversation. Tap it down.
Oh, the Psalm this week,
yeah.
Psalm 19. We're not going to hit it today, but you should read it because it's lovely.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, like in your own homes, make sure you read the Psalm and hang out with it. So
Kind of like right in the middle of the Bible, in case you're wondering where to find it. Okay, the preface of Sunday Seasons reads, Jesus attacks the commercialization of religion by driving merchants out of the temple. When challenged, he responds mysteriously with the first prediction of his own death and resurrection. In the midst of a seemingly stable religious center, Jesus suggests that the center itself is changed. All right. And the text reads, the gospel reads, the Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Remember, Zion, it's on a hill. He probably sang a psalm going up that hill, by the way. In the temple, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and the money changers seated at their tables, making a whip of cords. He drove all of them out of the temple, both the sheep and the cattle. He also poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. He told those who were selling doves, take these things out of here. Stop making my Father's house a marketplace. His disciples remembered that it was written, quote, zeal for your house will consume me, unquote. The Jews then said to him, what sign can you show us for doing this? And Jesus answered him, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. The Jews then said, this temple has been under construction for 46 years, and you will raise it up in 3 days? But Jesus was speaking of the temple of his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the word that Jesus had spoken. This is the gospel of our Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God. Oh my gosh. So, love this text. I love this text because I see it as an attempt to dismantle the organization that the temple had become. And I will share with you biblical scholar Marilyn Solomon, a little bit of what she wrote for Working Preacher. This was a couple of years ago, but it's still really quite, I mean, it just fits so well. She wrote, under Roman rule, the priests were not autonomous in their authority, even over religious matters. Roman officials appointed the chief priests, and he served their interests. So pay attention to that. Roman officials appointed the chief priests, and then he served their interests. Roman coffers benefited from the marketplace that supported sacrificial rites. A disruption at the marketplace at one of the temple courts during the festival, like Passover, affected Rome's revenues. We cannot know what Jesus had in mind by his angry demonstration, but he could not have been unaware that it would get the attention of the Roman authorities. Now, when I read that, I thought, so this sounds so familiar. You could really do a doozy of a political sermon on this piece, for sure. You know, how we appoint things and who gets what job. And right now, this is March of 2021. Every week, at least multiple times a week, it seems like somebody is getting sworn in to do something, right? because we have a new administration and things are shifting, and they have to go through the vetting cycle and that. But I didn't realize how, well, I've known that it's political, right? That a lot of the scripture in Rome is, I mean, there's Roman occupation and all that kind of stuff, but I didn't realize how much it would have been affected by like the coffers. Like you're having a big to do and they're taking a portion or a percentage of all the monies that are going through. So what do we have to do to receive forgiveness of sin back in Jesus' day? I mean, what are some of the things that people had to do? I'm talking to the other person on my screen.
Oh, you're asking me the question.
Yeah.
Okay. What are some of the things that people had to do to receive forgiveness? Sacrifice a pair of doves or a cow or sheep or something of that matter.
Right.
And march their butts all the way to Jerusalem to do it from wherever they happen to live.
Right.
And
so the
it had to be done on their behalf, like somebody else had to do.
Yes. So it's what would it be like if you had to pay for the forgiveness of sin? What if you are a really poor person and you wanted to be in right relationship with God? That would be a huge financial sacrifice, right? So I think part of what is going on here is Jesus is trying to shut the temple down, shut it down. I mean, I could go on and on about that, but I think one of the things that I think that Jesus was trying to teach in his ministry is this idea of kenosis, and that pouring out of self that we see in the Christ hymn in Philippians chapter 2, taking on the form of a slave, and he's teaching and living the life and preaching and doing all this stuff. And it seems like, at least reading through the lens of this particular one, that the Roman occupation and the temple life itself was pretty much the opposite of everything that he was doing. Not necessarily like in synagogue, like he was teaching, like the word of the Lord is upon me. I have come to bring, freedom to those who are oppressed. Blah, 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 blah. That whole mission statement of Jesus. But Jesus' idea of dying to self, according to Cynthia Bourgeau, Jesus' idea of dying to self was not through inter-renunciation and guarding of the purity of his being, but through radically squandering everything he had and was. And so this idea, in life, I'm just going to continue quoting her because I love how she said this. In life, he horrified the prim and proper by dining with tax collectors and prostitutes, by telling parables about extravagant generosity. It is love utterly poured out that opens up the gate to the kingdom of heaven. And this is what Jesus talked, and this is what Jesus walked. So I think that there is people are feeling a little bit of maybe wandering in a spiritual desert right now. The longing to be in community, the fact that we haven't been able to sing together in the same space. I mean, all those things I think are kind of weighing on the hearts of many people out there. We've been getting lots of questions about when are we reopening? How soon will that be? How does that work? And we can tell you, we'll let you know when we know, but we're following CDC guidelines and we have a smart team and all that kind of stuff, which is just important to note that it's not something that is dictated by the pastoral office. Our job is primarily word and sacrament, right? So we send out the word and we trust that it will not return empty. And we do this week after week after week. The nice tie-in, I think, with the Exodus text is this idea of Jesus summarizing the law into a relational understanding, which is love God, love neighbors as self. Remember the encounter with the rich young ruler. What do I have to do to get the kingdom of God? Like this, it's just this. I've kept all the laws. Well, okay, but also this. And he went away feeling very, very sad about that. but we're still doing it. You know, we may be the distributed community, but we're still doing engaging ministry, and there's lots of things that are happening. By the way, you'll hear this announcement on Sunday too, but like we're partnering with Open Hands Ministry to bring juice to shore up their food bank. That is a ministry out of Bethlehem in the Midway. Our dear friend Kristen Fryer is a pastor there. And so, you know, we're going to be putting some kits together. We're going to be looking at different opportunities for mission and outreach. And yeah, are we going to physically be able to get together and put together homeless kits or kits for young parents? I don't know yet. But spring is coming.
Yes.
Spring is coming. There will be butterflies that will be coming out of cocoons. Life will return to a new normal, not the same normal.
Which is good, because the old normal did not work for everybody. Let's not forget about that.
That's right. So we are trying to make this a really tangible and connectable sermon for your everyday walking around life. So one of the things that I'm encouraging you to consider is what does centering prayer look like? I mean, how is it that we can center ourselves? Because Jesus often went up to a quiet place to pray. Like he needed that quiet time. And maybe some of you are feeling like fed up, like I've had enough quiet time. But what sort of interiority work could you do to enhance your spirituality during such a time as this? And
Yeah.
we're a year in here to a pandemic that is global. And if you've been sitting there just waiting for something to change, how about if you hold up a mirror and figure out what you need to change and work on that kind of stuff? And I don't mean to be bossy about that, but gosh, you know, the other day I was walking the dogs down in the valley, and I'd been walking without my headphones on, just trying to really be in each present moment, you know, and I stopped dead in my tracks, and I looked over and up, and there was a male cardinal at the very tippy top of a tree that was singing his heart out. That felt like a hymn to me. That felt like a holy moment. But I think sometimes in our prior lives, we were so rushed that maybe we wouldn't even hear that, or, you know, we'd have the headphones on, or just, you know, I got to walk the dogs, you know, but I've been trying to really marinate not only in the scriptures, but also in this Lectio Divina, focusing on the word. And so something that you could do is come up with a word or a phrase that resonates with you. And it could be from scripture, or it could be something that's made up in your own mind that summarizes your spirituality. And it could be something as be still and know that I'm God. Be still and know that I'm God. Be still and know that I'm God. You know, whatever that repetitive phrase is, so that when you get agitated or you get stressed out or your anxiety spikes for whatever reason, you can bring yourself back into your body and trust that God is God, and we are God's people, and we are beloved, and we have a relationship that is lovely and always growing. It's not a stagnant thing. It's not a stagnant pool of water. The other image that I've been thinking about too is that we are the vines. You know, we are the branches. We're a part of. Some things will need to get pruned as the church begins to reopen. And what does that look like? What do we want to trim away so that we can be stronger in some other areas? What do we need to foster for that taproot? Like, what do we need to put at that in order to strengthen it and really be the hands and feet in God in the world? And it's, I think what I like about the Sylvia Bourgeau quote there is that she names that line of, this is what Jesus taught, and this is what Jesus walked. So it is, yes, words are important, but actions often speak louder than words. And you know, go ahead.
Talks, my walk talks louder than my talk talks.
It's a both and.
It works. It is both and.
It's a both and. It's not a one and done kind of deal. Yep. So that's where I'm going to leave it for y'all.
Awesome.
Talking about a holy dismantling this coming Sunday.
Perfect. Any other announcements for this week?
Yes, you can join us for drive-through communion anytime, Wednesdays from 5 till 7. If it's above freezing at 5, that'll be posted on our Facebook page. Be sure to like it. You can join us for worship on Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. either on the YouTube. Also subscribe to our channel and like our Facebook page. We have this Bible study, of course, every Thursday rolling out. And on Wednesdays at 6 o'clock, we are rolling our way through the Psalms. And if you've missed any of those services, go all the way back to Ash Wednesday and marinate in the Psalms with us, because those songs are laments, they're praise, they help us do the naming of the harder emotions that I think many of us might be feeling during this time of just a little bit of spiritual fatigue. But we can change that. I mean, we can reboot. It's going to be okay. And gosh, I can't think of anything other than that. There'll be other announcements that'll come up. If you need something, let us know.
Yeah.
Email us, text, call, whatever. We are here for you.
Don't forget to snag your copy of the newsletter. It's online right now too. Probably got an email about it, but it's online. So head on to our
online.
website.
And if for some reason you know somebody who needs a paper copy of that, like they don't have access to the screen that you're looking at right now or the podcast that you're listening to right now, please let us know and we'll add that, because we want them to be tethered with us. We want them to be connected. So there's a few people that have asked for sermons and bulletins, and we're absolutely happy to send out a piece of paper with it written on it.
Absolutely.
Into your snail mail box.
All right. Cool.
Thank
Blessings,
you.
people of God. Thanks for hanging out with us today. See you on Sunday.
All right. Bye-bye.